racial wealth disparity is a primary index of the cumulative economic effects of all of the racial injustices that have taken place in the United States. And that gap is enormous. Collectively, Black Americans who are descendants of folks enslaved in the United States constitute about 13% of the nation's population, but have about 2.6% of the nation's wealth. So the question that can be raised is, what are the circumstances that led to this enormous disparity? And we argue in our book, From Here to Equality, that the starting point has to be the failure to provide the formerly enslaved with the land grants that they were promised in the aftermath of the Civil War. Then, to the extent that Blacks were able to accumulate property and develop businesses, in many, many cases, those were destroyed by the massacres that I was talking about. And their property was actually seized by folks who engaged in the massacres. But if you turn to the 20th century, where we have placed a significant amount of emphasis on home ownership as a source of wealth. For folks in the middle of the wealth distribution, home ownership is a home is the most significant asset that they have in their possession. And in the 20th century, there is a set of policies and practices that disproportionately deprive Blacks of access to either outright ownership of a home or to ownership of a home with comparable value or equity as homes that were owned by whites. The GI Bill is introduced for the purposes of creating upward mobility for veterans of World War II. It facilitated college attendance, and it also facilitated home purchases. There was a pattern of systematic exclusion of Black veterans from the benefits. In the state of Mississippi, there were only 2 Black veterans who got the benefits of the GI Bill.
What would it look like if, like the Jews, Black Americans had a country or countries that were advocating on their behalf for a full reparations program? What would happen if African countries came together and said, yes, the US government should pay reparations to Black Americans, and we're not going to allow another US corporation to come here until you do? For us, the criteria for eligibility is twofold. We're talking about Black Americans, first of all. So individuals who can prove that they are descendants of at least one person who was enslaved in the United States, and that at least 12 years prior to the enactment of an actual reparations program or a study commission, self-identified as Black, African American, or Negro.
I know you also in the past have talked to going beyond direct payments to funding historically Black colleges,
yes,
etc.
Yes.
So talk more about that avenue.
It makes sense that the descendants of enslaved persons would have to contend with that we would have lots of trauma in our DNA, in our very bodies, in our psyches, that we have to undo, and not by ourselves. Part of that work, Janet, I think that white people have a role to play in the healing of other peoples. And that's why I was, and I'm interested in the discourse and the practice of reparations. That I think that reparations in this country is not the only piece, but it is a key component of helping to heal people in this land.
I did a case in the Missouri Supreme Court and won it 4-3. And the case said that if a public defender can prove that the office of the public defender, this would be the whole state of Missouri, okay, has too many cases, then the judge can't appoint. The public defender has a duty, not just the power to do that, but the duty to do it, and no judge can order him to take more cases than he or she can competently handle, or the state, there are 353 lawyers here in Missouri. It's a big public law firm. So you can't order those people to do that if you can show that they don't have the resources to provide competent representations. 40% of our prison and jail population could be released tomorrow morning without any public safety consequences whatsoever.